Could you just talk a little bit about the broader urgency of the moment that we're in regards to immigration? DACA is a critical piece of it, but there's some other really important aspects that we need to kind of understand in a deeper way in regards to the urgency of the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There are various things that we could talk about, right? We could talk about how applications for benefits has more or less come to a standstill. We could talk about the president's latest order that will basically prevent any green card applications that come from overseas from being processed, and we'll see whether that actually goes into effect. But I think one of the most pressing issues for us to reflect upon is the incarceration of immigrants throughout our immigration system right now. And I know that incarceration is really an issue that you've, taken a huge leadership role on with your book, which I really appreciate as well. I think oftentimes what a lot of Americans don't realize is that when we say something like that a non-citizen is jailed or detained or incarcerated, they're being incarcerated, they're being put in chains, being put behind bars simply because the government wants to affect a civil sanction. So in other words, they haven't been sentenced to a crime. They're not even being accused of a crime. That's not to say that if you are accused of a crime, that's a reason to jail a person, but it's just an important component of what's going on with immigration. So we say people who are immigrants are being put in immigration detention. Who are we talking about? We're really talking about a couple of key categories of people. We're talking about people who have come to this country, who are seeking asylum, who are fleeing persecution or violence in their home countries. That includes many Christian leaders, for example, who were persecuted in their countries for their faith, who found themselves at risk of violence because of gangs. In many cases, it's just simply people who are the most vulnerable in any given society. So if you think about, just who they might be, women, children, right, where there's rampant gang violence, where there's political violence, the brave people who are willing to stand up to political violence. So folks who come here seeking asylum, it applies to people who have lived here for a long time, but who maybe don't have immigration papers. It actually includes people who are DACA recipients or who formerly had DACA. There's been a number of cases of folks there who are put into detention. Or it could be people who have immigration status, so who are green card holders. In the case of people who have legal status, they might be facing deportation because of a past criminal offense. But the thing is, it's for a past criminal offense where they've already served their sentence.
Hmm.
And often that sentence might not even have included incarceration at all because it wasn't serious enough.
That's
It
a
might have,
critical distinction for people to realize.
yeah, I mean, oftentimes the immigration penalty, detention, and the prospect of deportation is far worse than the actual uh, punishment that the criminal justice system puts out, which might be a fine or probation, right? Because the underlying crime is not that serious. So what we're seeing right now, though, with COVID-19 is a situation where, look, at the end of the day, social distancing in a jail setting is just not possible,
Not at
right?
all.
For that, it's just not possible. And I think what we're seeing, we're starting to slowly see some recognition of that. We're only seeing it because the numbers of infections and honestly the number of deaths has gone up. And so at the end of the day, I think one thing for us to think about is, does it make sense for us to have this system where people are first being jailed for these civil offenses, but where now jail time is essentially putting people at risk of receiving death sentences? And that's the reality that we're living in. And that's an urgency in particular that I hope the church will join in to feel and to share and to act on that urgency.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it gets lost upon people kind of in the midst of us being so concerned about ourselves and our own households, how vulnerable people who are in confinement are to the spreading of the disease, to catching it, and ultimately, literally, their inability to follow medical professionals' recommendations right now.